could I be so naive? Like I told myself I wouldn't be this naive. And so like all those thoughts, right? And I'm in the shower and I'm like crying. And then I was like, wait a minute. I ate the food. The depression was gone. It was definitely gone. Then I ate the food. Then I had this like horrible digestive reaction. Then I got itchy and now I'm depressed. Like logically, this is caused by that. But I couldn't, like it was hard to get that in my head with the depression back.
Welcome to the Fat Emperor podcast. I'm your host, Ivor Cummins. We're supported by the Irish Heart Disease Awareness Charity, which advocates a simple CT scan to reveal your CAC score. So, know your score and take action to prevent that premature heart attack. Everything you need to know will be right here. Hey Mikhaila, I'm delighted to meet you here finally.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I've been trying to catch up with you, but you're living in Canada and I mostly just go US stateside.
Yeah. It's not worth visiting in the winter anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think we'll start off with your fascinating story. Now, I know you've told it many times, but it's a story worth retelling in my mind. So if you maybe go through your kind of younger years and the challenges you began to experience, and then through to your kind of revelation, if you will, and how you began to address those issues.
Okay. I'll run through this like as quickly as I can. It's a lot. I started experiencing symptoms of juvenile rheumatoid arthritis when I was 2. My mom noticed I walked funny, so I was actually formally diagnosed juvenile rheumatoid arthritis at age 7. Was put on Enbrel, methotrexate, and naproxen. And I was the first kid in Canada actually to be put on Enbrel, and I had 35 active joints when I was first diagnosed, and most of them were shot with cortisone, which actually did improve my mobility at the time. So it was like all my big joints. It was basically every joint except for my spine, like my jaw. It was everywhere. Then I was taking those medications, and then in grade 5, I got put on SSRIs for really severe depression, and I was having like severe enough that I was having like suicidal ideation as a kid. And my parents kind of clued in because my dad has this severe depression, or had this severe depression. And so he kind of saw it in me and brought me to a psychiatrist. They put me on medication, which honestly made a huge difference. You'll see I have a problem with the medical system, but we didn't know what was going on. And the SSRIs really helped when I was a kid. They brought other problems, but they helped. Then when I was 14, I got diagnosed with, I didn't get diagnosed, I started experiencing really horrible fatigue. So fatigue and itching everywhere. And I didn't have a rash or anything, I was just really, really itchy. Like I kind of ignored it, but it was like mosquito bite itchy. And I was exhausted. When I was 17, I got my hip and ankle replaced. So even though I was on these immune suppressants, whatever was causing this arthritis was bad enough that even with the medication, my cartilage just disappeared from my hip and ankle in a year. And that was a rough year. It was like May, I got my hip replaced. November, I got my ankle replaced. I was on OxyContin for the entire year. It was like the worst year of my entire life. It was really horrible. And then I went off to university, and my diet deteriorated because I started eating like a university student eats. Which was basically cinnamon toast crunch and ginger ale and pierogies and Mr. Noodles. Right. Yeah.
Okay, so that's not high nutrient dense ancestral food, shall we say?
No, not at all. And I had no idea about that. And I also didn't really think it mattered because from what I knew, first of all, I didn't know grains were a problem. I thought grains were still healthy. I still thought, everything in moderation and it's just diet. Right? I mean, it's just exercise. So that's still what I thought. So I was like, well, I'm skinny. I can eat all these terrible things. And then it doesn't matter. So within the first month of going away to university, my mental health deteriorated even further. And by Christmas, it's like 3 months of eating worse than I'd been eating at home. I was having hypomanic episodes, and I was still on, I had tried to up my antidepressants. I'd gone to a walk-in clinic and said, like, something is wrong, I need more. And they'd said, well, actually, This is associated with heart problems, so we're gonna have to cut it in half. And I like burst into tears in the walk-in clinic, and they're like, okay, actually, you know what? Just stay where you are for now. But I went on Wellbutrin, and I upped that 450 milligrams a day, and ended up having a seizure from that amount of medication. I tried switching over to an SNRI. That made me really, really angry. So I stopped that right away. But my mental health mostly is what deteriorated. I always kind of had arthritis, but mental health just got shot. I started gaining weight. And I moved back home the second year of university because I was crazy. I was sleeping all the time. My fatigue got to a point where I was like, I couldn't wake up. My roommates would come in at like 4 p.m. and be like, wake up, wake up, wake up. I'd be like, oh, I'm tired. I'd get up, and then I'd drink because drinking helped me wake up. And so my parents were like, well, you're sleeping all the time because you're drinking all the time. And I was like, well, maybe, but drinking makes me feel awake, and nothing makes me feel awake. So it was hard to figure out what was caused by me and what wasn't caused by me.
Yeah, but you acknowledge though, and this is interesting, some people who are very frustrated, disappointed with the medical system, they become anti-everything, but the medications, although they would cause negative deleterious effects, they gave you a huge boost at times. They did what you needed at that time, many of them.
Well, it's hard to say. Like the cortisone injections when I was a kid, I went from not being able to walk to running around when I went on the Enbrel, the immune suppressant. But I still needed a hip and ankle replacement when I was 17. So I was like, why is it? It's reducing the inflammation, but the joints are still getting eaten. The SSRI, I guess, is what I would say had the most benefit for me. And I did have side effects that weren't pleasant, but my teenage, I don't know if I would have made it through that without them.
Actually, and that's the point, you mentioned suicidal thoughts there, and I saw your great interview with Joe Rogan, but one thing that occurred to me was to explore that. You obviously went pretty close to the edge. The amount of suffering you were basically having to succumb to was huge. So to what extent were you thinking life's not worth it, or to what extent were you always able to just pep yourself up?
Well, I remember, so when I was a kid and I first had some suicidal thoughts, I didn't have a plan or anything. It was just like, I wonder if people would care if I was gone. Like, just like little things like that. And I went on medication pretty quickly after that started, and then it went away. The second time it happened, I was 17, and it wasn't actually depression exactly. It was pain. So I was on a lot of pain medication for my hip, and then I had my hip done, and then my ankle hurt so much that it was just like, oh no, I have to go through this again. And then they told me I had to wait 3.5 years for an ankle replacement. And I freaked out one night. I was in bed. I was hyperventilating. I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't wait 3.5 years. And at that point I made this plan. I was like, no, it wasn't 3.5 years at that point. At that point they said, we don't know when. And that's what got me. I was like, I don't know when this is going to stop. If there's a deadline, then it's different. And that night I thought, okay, if they don't tell me by the fall, then that's it. I can make it 4 more months and that's it. So that was rough. But by the time the fall rolled around, we had a surgical date. And then when I went to university, I didn't pep myself up. I guess when I was 17 and I had that night where I was like, I can only do this for 4 more months, something snapped, and it was like, this isn't what's going to take me down type of thing. So whenever I got to the point where I was like, I can't handle this. I can't handle this. I was just like, no, that is not what take. I'm not letting this get me. This isn't the end. Screw you. That's not how it ends. So I kind of changed the depression into anger. And the anger is it's not healthy, but it's more positive emotion. So that's how I dealt with it. It was like, no, I'm not letting this get me. That's not how it ends.
Yeah, that's clearly resilience. And often it manifests in you switch those emotions that could take you down, you switch them into anger and fighting back. And it's a healthy thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it seems to have worked.
Got you through it.
Yeah.
For a period. But this is now into the whole college period. You're eating Cheerios or whatever, all this crap. And you're going to now decline again. You put on a lot of weight, I think.
I gained 30 pounds in a year and a half. And I didn't have a scale. It was just like, my pants don't fit. And I was like, and like, I'm pretty, exhausted and ill and on a whole bunch of medication and drinking all the time. So I wasn't as aware as I should have been. But at one point I was like, okay, this is weird. Like something. So I started going to the gym. I was like, because, I gained weight. Clearly I'm not exercising enough. Started going to the gym. It was like, this isn't working. And I was exhausted. It was hard going to the gym. So I moved back home at one point. I like went through a bad university breakup, and it was like that was the end. I was sleeping constantly. I was really depressed. I was arthritic. It was itchy. I moved back home. And sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, you repeatedly mentioned the sleeping constantly and the exhaustion. I have a friend who had undiagnosed Lyme's for over 12 years, and he went through hell, but that was the first manifestation. Was he just had chronic fatigue, and it took them 12 years to diagnose him, by which time he'd taken a drug for every disease known to man.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of, well, we can get into this later.
We'll
get into it later. Okay. Chronic fatigue is a tricky one too, because you don't see it, you get blamed for it. So it's like, oh, maybe you're just not pulling yourself out of bed. Like everyone's a little bit tired, just try harder. And so I got that a lot. And my parents, I would say, are pretty apologetic now, especially once I was formally diagnosed with like idiopathic hypersomnia. But there was a solid period of time, maybe like 7 or 8 years, where it was like, Mikhaila, like you're being lazy. I was like, well, maybe I am being lazy. Maybe I'm just not trying hard enough. But at some point, it was like my whole body would just fall asleep. Like I was sleeping in exams. I started taking so I moved back home, and I kind of clued into how badly I was doing. So I had just been coasting and being like, well, I'll take this medication. I'll drink. I'll just coast. And I got home and was like, I am really ill. And I also started getting another symptom. It was like my skin started getting affected. I started getting rashes and things. And I was like, I can't handle. I can't do all these invisible illnesses and also a visible problem. I don't want a visible problem. I started getting little tiny blisters on my fingers, just like itchy blistering. Like, oh my God, too many things. So I went home and started researching and started taking Adderall. And the Adderall, actually, I started taking because I was driving home one day and I fell asleep and drifted into another lane. And it was like microseconds of sleep, right? But I was really tired. I relaxed, fell asleep. And a truck, like giant truck, honked at me and swerved. And I was like, I'm going to die. If I don't figure out this fatigue thing, I'm going to die. So I started taking Adderall after that.
That's a wake-up call, yeah. I mean, it's happened to me once or twice, and it makes you
It's scary.
Yeah,
It's scary.
And Adderall is a pretty significant kind of upper.
Holy cow, yeah. I used to take caffeine pills, and it was like nothing. Coffee, nothing. Like I could sleep through anything. I started taking Adderall, and I went from 10 milligrams a day, and then had a tolerance. It grew pretty quickly. I went to 40 milligrams a day. 40 milligrams a day is a lot of Adderall. So I had that like beside my bed. So I'd set an alarm for 7, take the Adderall, go back to sleep. And then it takes about 30 minutes to kick in. It takes less than that really. But I'd wake up about 30 minutes later and I'd just like spring out of bed because it was like my heart is, it was a lot of Adderall, but I needed that much to actually keep myself awake. And I'd still have a nap after lunch. And it's like I can feel my heart pumping. And it was like I still need a nap. But that's when I started really, really researching and eventually got into this whole diet thing.
And the skin, of course, you've repeatedly explained how that really hit you personally. Whatever about all the dreadful replacements of hips, dreadful pain, to have your skin rashes and pustules and all, that's just offensive.
It was. Yeah. It was like I felt like Job. It was just like, not this too. Like I always had makeup to like kind of put on a mask to face the world, and then it was like, oh no, now people can see you're sick.
So basically it was time for Dr. Google, big time.
Dr. Google.
You hit the web.
Thank God for Google. Yeah. I Googled like every skin condition imaginable and looked at horrible pictures. And eventually came across like this blistering rash called dermatitis herpetiformis, which can happen if you have celiac disease. And interestingly enough, I'd never considered myself having something like that because I never had any gut pain. Like throughout this entire thing, I was like, at least I'm not allergic to food. Never had any gut pain, so I didn't think about celiac disease. But it turns out a huge percentage of people with celiac disease have no gut pain, and a lot of those people get this rash. So that's the first thing. So I went down like I went down the research route and hit the whole gluten thing with celiac disease first. And I cut out gluten right away. And honestly, it did not change much. I was convinced it was bad for you. It was like, I looked into, what it does to the gut, what kind of molecules it releases and how that can lead to leaky gut. And I was like, oh, all this is in the scientific literature. Like, we know gluten triggers zonulin. Zonulin gives you leaky gut. Why didn't my doctors tell me that? So I was really confused. I was like, this is out there. Celiac disease couples with other autoimmune disorders. I have an autoimmune disorder. Why wasn't I tested? Why weren't my doctors telling me not to eat gluten? I was really confused because it's like in the literature. And then things just got weirder from then on. I went on an elimination diet and things improved pretty quickly. I gave up like a little bit into it. So I was on basically autoimmune paleo kind of at the very beginning, more restricted. But I just tried to eat things that people weren't allergic to because I hadn't heard of any diets. I'd heard of paleo, but I hadn't delved into it at all. I didn't know what it meant. So I just was like, made a list of foods I thought people wouldn't be allergic to from my limited knowledge. It was no nightshades because I'd heard nightshades were bad.
That's a cliche, yeah, almost.
So there was no nightshades. Apples were okay. Apples, root vegetables, except for potatoes, meat, because like no one's allergic to meat, fish.
Eggs, I suppose no one.
I didn't even include eggs at the beginning. Because that's one of like the eggs are an allergen, right? That's a pretty common one. Eggs, they put warnings on like if things have eggs in them, eggs, nuts, soy, wheat.
Yeah, I often wondered about the eggs. You're right, that has come up, but
That's like a true, not a sensitivity necessarily, but a true allergy. They put that on the outside of boxes anyway. That's where I was getting my information. Mainly.
From the packets.
From the, top allergens.
So you have meat, apples, I suppose green veg, above ground leafy veg, salad, and not much beyond that. It was a strong elimination diet?
Oh, it was, yeah. I did that for a week. And then now looking back on it, I was probably experiencing cravings because I'd gone pretty high carb to that. I didn't know you get cravings and things. But I reintroduced banana, almond, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free muffins that I'd made myself. It was like the healthiest muffins you could possibly have.
That's quite a few ingredients there together, though, you've brought in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And now I know it was probably, actually, bananas and almonds both gave me really bad flare-ups. But I didn't know that at the time, so I had a bunch of them. And I woke up the next morning, my wrists were sore. And by this time, I should mention, I'd stopped taking my arthritis medication. I just stopped when I went gluten-free because I thought, how am I going to be able to monitor my flare-ups when I take out gluten if I'm on this medication? And I wasn't really convinced it was working anyway, considering I'd had these joint replacements. I was taking Tylenol 3 every day for pain anyway. So I was like, it's not really doing anything anyway. So I stopped that. So then September rolls around, I go on this elimination diet, and I reintroduced this banana almond flour muffins, and I had a really horrible arthritic flare-up from that, which didn't just randomly happen. I was like, this isn't a coincidence. It happened too quickly. I was like in bed, not able to walk because of my knees, and my knees never really flared up. I was like, this is weird. So then I actually believed in it because I first went on it and I was like, this is stupid, basically. It was like my mom had brought me to a naturopath. They had given me this like a elimination diet, and I'd looked at their elimination diet and thought, why can I eat lemons and not oranges? Like, this is a stupid elimination diet. I'm maybe it wasn't, but I was skeptical and annoyed at everything. And I'd been to naturopaths before, and I was just like, no, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it my way. Come up with my own elimination diet. So I really went into it after I had that first flare up, and the first month I saw like huge results, really. I lost 3 pant sizes and 5 pounds. And that was awesome because I was like, oh, I have abs. It's been like a month and I have abs. Like, I thought I'd been going to the gym trying to get these stupid abs that never formed. And it was like, oh, that was just bloating. I was bloated. Like, that's what bloating was. Like, that month was crazy. My skin healed for the first time. Really, it was always kind of flaring up even after I dropped gluten. And that month, my skin looked better than it had in years.
So was it maybe 60, 70% better? I mean, not completely amazing,
I got
big.
Better. It like 85, like huge improvement. And then, so I was thinking, okay, the arthritis obviously is food related. That's great news. The skin looks like it's food related. That's great news. It never even occurred to me that the depression would be food related because my dad has it or had it, my grandpa. Just thought that was a genetic chemical imbalance, which is, what you're told. So that didn't even occur to me. But 3 months into this limited diet, my depression started to lift. And I could feel, like, even on the medication I was taking, I could feel it go away. You can still tell you're depressed when you're taking that medication. It's like it puts a net at the bottom of the pit you're falling into. It doesn't actually get rid of the hole. And so, yeah, my depression started lifting in the wintertime in Canada, which isn't usually when depression lifts, if ever. So I stopped taking my antidepressants, and I was fine. I was good. I was happier than I'd ever been. And at this point, I was still eating. Like, it's a strange story. I was still eating some rice, which later really started to bother me. I was still eating some rice, but mostly what I was eating was, like, slow-cooked stews. So it was, like, meat and root vegetables, salads, apples. That was basically it. No seed oils or anything, like olive oil, coconut oil, spices, but spices. It was pretty whole foody, limited.
So it's quite simplified, kind of meat and 2 veg type thing, pretty much. Okay, which is not a bad elimination diet, especially if you get rid of vegetable oils and all the modern fake foods and, the high starch, sugary, refined carbs and sugars. So it's pretty good. And your skin had cleared up, which was a huge thing, obviously. That was your big totem. I mean, that was massive. And the depression had lifted. Sans did the drugs. The drugs were gone, but your depression was still better than it might have been before.
It was gone. It was gone.
Essentially gone.
Oh, it was gone at that point. Like, gone. When I stopped taking my SSRI, because I had thought I was going to be on that forever. Like, I have a YouTube video up from 2013, and it's like, I will never stop taking this medication. It's something like that. So I thought I was on that forever.
And as an interesting aside, I know the SSRI, they believe the mechanism by which it works, but I got a paper sent to me literally a few days ago that they're now investigating and finding the SSRI neurological inflammation.
Yeah.
It's acting on pathways, not just on the receptors that they thought.
Yeah.
So everything goes back.
I know. Weird, huh? Crazy. So yeah, that lifted, and I felt better than I'd ever felt. In my entire life. And I was really excited about it. And I got my dad to start because at this point, he was overweight. He was around 218. And he was napping all the time. And he had GERD and he had but mostly he had this horrible depression. And I was like, mine's gone. I don't know how it happened, but it's gone. And he had been watching me, obviously, and like my arthritis is clearing up, like my fatigue is getting better. So at the same time my depression lifted, my fatigue started to lift, and I stopped taking all my medication at that point. Because as soon as I let go of the SSRI, I was like, oh, if I don't have to take this, I don't have to take anything.
Yeah, now that's a battery of huge changes. Taking medication out and getting huge improvements simultaneously. So this is a massive shift. What time, chronologically, this is?
This is 2015 December.
2015 December.
At this point. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so major breakthrough, and now you're really getting somewhere. Mm-hmm. And Jordan then himself is beginning to maybe leverage what you're doing, seeing the effects.
It was basically like the effect with me was so huge that he couldn't say there's nothing to this. Because he'd been on the diet has nothing to do with anything train, which I had as well, mostly because of him. My mom had been like, we should eliminate sugar, we should eliminate meat. She wasn't necessarily on the right track, but she was like, we should focus on diet. But Dad was like, there's no scientific evidence concluding diet has anything to do with anything. But then when he saw these changes with me, he was like, okay, this is obviously, there's something to this. So then he started on it. And then I had my first unmedicated, really, really horrible food reintroduction reaction. And that was after I put my dad on the diet. And if I had known how horrible the food reintroduction reactions would have been, I probably would have waited because the next year was pretty bad.
And this was another introduction, or is this the bran muffin or the banana muffin we
Oh
talked
no,
about?
that was easy. Like I was still on antidepressants and things. Like it was a couple of days of arthritis, but arthritis is one thing. It's the mood stuff that is really scary. So I tried to reintroduce soy in December. I talked about this on Rogan.
Yeah.
It was horrible. That was probably the scariest thing that's ever happened to me.
And sustained and persistent. It wasn't a dreadful short-term thing. It had legs.
3.5 weeks. I was like, who expects that from food?
Well, soy, I mean, yeah.
Well, now I know, but I thought, I didn't know what a health food was. Like the first thing I tried to get back after my elimination diet was Sour Patch candy. Because I looked at the ingredients and I thought, there's no wheat. That was basically it. I was like, the only thing that's in here is sugar and dye. No one's allergic to sugar. Because I was still thinking like allergy, right? Like, so that's where my brain was at still. I didn't know anything about diet. So Sour Patch Kids didn't go well. Shocker.
I can guess. But the soy was the real killer. And it's true, exactly what you say, Mikhaila, that how would you know soy was bad? And the vast majority don't know it. And the American Heart Association are telling us to take heart-healthy vegetable oils. Now, we know vegetable oils are basically effluent from an industrial runoff tank. But top bodies are still telling us to eat these foods. But we'll get back to the soy. So the soy experience briefly was several weeks of kind of hell.
Hell. Like it was like, it was as if my entire world had switched into the same world, but a hell version. I like ate a whole bunch and then I had terrible digestive distress. Within like 15 minutes, my body was like, no way. And I was like, okay, no more soy. Whatever. I was still in a good mood, right? My depression's gone, whatever. I can't eat soy. Oh, well.
And it was soy and noodles, just the meal?
No. So the meal was, I had edamame beans, tofu, and miso soup. But the miso soup sometimes has gluten, so I had gone to a specific place to buy miso that didn't have gluten, and then bok choy. So it was basically all soy and some bok choy. And it was not the bok choy that I reacted to that badly. So that happened. Terrible digestive distress. I can just put it at that. And then 5 hours later, I got really, really itchy everywhere. I was like, oh, that can't be good. I'll just go to bed. So I went to bed, and the morning I woke up, and I was like, something's really, really wrong. And I got into the shower, and I just like bawled in the shower. It's like, how could I be so stupid thinking that it's depression? Like the depression was back the next day. It's like, how could I be so stupid thinking that this was food related? Like, how could I be so naive? Like I told myself I wouldn't be this naive. And so like all those thoughts, right? And I'm in the shower and I'm like crying. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like, I ate the food. The depression was gone. It was definitely gone. Then I ate the food. Then I had this like horrible digestive reaction. Then I got itchy and now I'm depressed. Like logically, this is caused by that. But I couldn't, like, it was hard to get that in my head with the depression back. And then I was like, well, it'll go away, maybe. Probably not, because I was in that state of mind. It's like, it'll go away. And the next day it got worse. And I was crying all the time. And by the nighttime, my brother drove me home because I needed to drive home. Like, I was so out of it. I couldn't, like, see very well. It was really bad. And I was like, I can't drive myself. Can you drop me off at my apartment? And he dropped me off, and I talked about this on Rogan, but I turned around to look at him to like wave goodbye, and he looked at me, and his face was a demon head. And it wasn't like a flash. Like I saw it long enough, like he looked at me, and then he turned and started driving away, and then I could see that it was my brother again. I was standing at my door, and I was like, okay, that wasn't real. I was like, great, now I've made myself insane now. Now I'm insane. I thought I was crazy before, but I just hallucinated. So I like got into my bed and then spent the next 3.5 weeks like miserably depressed, itchy. My skin broke out. My arthritis came back after about a week. And it was like delayed. There were steps to it. And I wrote down everything mostly to stay sane. Like these are my reactions every day. And just like prayed and waited to see if it would lift. And then it did in about 3.5 weeks. And then I repeated that pattern with introducing foods for a year.
And you were, crucially, you were not going willy-nilly and trying foods. You knew the extent of what could happen, the duration of the aftermath and how long it was. So you were, I think, doing a diary and recording each introduction and being very careful to track and make sure you were clear safely for, say, a couple of weeks. Okay, now that's safe. Because if people just try different foods randomly, they will never decode it. Mm-hmm. No way. Not when the effect can last for weeks or maybe be delayed a week before it starts.
Yeah, that I had that took a while to figure out too. But I knew because of that first reaction, I was like, okay, 3.5 weeks, and I wrote it down. Yeah, every day I wrote down all my symptoms, and now I know, with reintroductions, sometimes if I'd have a little bit wrong, I'd be okay. Usually it hits by day 4, but I've had some experiences where it takes up to day 7. The more minor ones, right? The bigger the reaction, the faster it hits. So soy was like instant. The bigger the reaction is either at that time or the next day, but it can take up to 7 days. So yeah, you got to go super, super, super slow.
That's a killer. Lag time with any complex problem, and your problem is certainly complex. Lag time from an input can really fool people. But congratulations, you figured that all out and you tracked it and you got to the source. So you began to find out then there's myriad different foods that can cause a reaction. So you were heading towards a conclusion that, hey, I need an extremely limited food set to stay in this great zone.
Yeah.
And that was trial and error, as you say, over pretty much 12 months of trial and error.
Yeah.
Okay, that was pretty comprehensive work. So where were you at 12 months, your full learning as to what I need to eat and what I don't eat?
Well, I hadn't actually been, so I'd been able to reintroduce pears and apples.
Fruits.
Yeah, and that was it. I'd tried, but I mean, to be honest, like what I had tried first was Sour Patch. Like no wonder that didn't go well. And then almond butter. And it turns out I just developed a nut allergy, an actual nut allergy. So that didn't go well. Then soy, that didn't go well. And then I think I tried cane sugar again. That didn't go well. Like I wasn't doing, and then I tried whey. I got like lactose-free whey powder, and I was really trying to find something that was easy because I wasn't eating out, and I was used to eating out all the time. I was cooking everything myself. I was in university. I was like, this is a huge pain. I found this like whey protein powder from like a gut health store that was pure lactose and casein-free whey. And I was like, it's called as Absorb Plus. And I was like, if I can just live off of that, like, I don't even want to eat food anymore. I had a horrible reaction to that.
Even with the casein as well as the lactose
Lactose casein-free, yeah.
So super sensitive. But then again, given you have an autoimmune history of such severity, your artillery, and they're very impressive artillery, the immune system, the innate and the adaptive, it's poised to react to nearly anything. So nearly anything is triggering it. I mean, essentially. Mm-hmm. But at this point, after the whey and you've tried everything, were you beginning to just center down on the ultra elimination diet? You were closing in on that?
Well, at that point, I had 27 safe foods. So I had a list of it because they were on my parents' fridge. I was like, Dad, nothing but that. And he had a hell of a time with that, which I guess makes sense after like 4 years of eating whatever you wanted to. He was like, well, I'll just have a little. He was doing 99%, which would have been pretty much good enough, right? But because of this mood disorder, it wasn't good enough. And because the reactions are 3.5 weeks long, every 3 weeks he would have he'd go over to his friend's house and they'd bug him about eating food. And he's very polite, and he'd be like, okay, so he'd have a bite. Like 3.5 weeks gone, right? So then I was trying to explain this, and he was like, well, that just doesn't make sense, right? He understood that's what it was like for me. He could give me that, but it was like couldn't give it to himself. So part of the reason I was trying to reintroduce things was to vary the diet more so he would have an easier time. Because I was okay with being symptom free. It was like, yay, this is what life is like. Great. But he was having a really hard time with it and was still reacting. He had a miserable year that year. Like I would say his mental health actually, he lost a whole bunch of weight. He stopped snoring. He stopped napping. His GERD went away. His gum disease went away. And his mental health just plummeted from these stupid reactions.
Ironically, given all of that improvement in diet, all of those benefits, and then you get hit with one of the killer ones. I mean, neurological. Okay.
Yeah, and he was still medicated, and it got worse. It changed. I was like, what? What is going on? So part of the reason I was doing the reintroductions was because he was having such a hard time. But I ended up with a list of 27 foods and was like, screw it. I'll just live like this. Things were good, and then I got pregnant, and my immune system problems came back. And at first I thought it was the pregnancy. We limited carbs more. We cut out all the sweet potatoes. We cut out the apples. We cut out the pears. Because I noticed that if I ate a whole bunch of those one day, I'd be itchier the next day. And my dad noticed his mood would be worse if he ate a whole bunch of sweet potatoes. So we cut out those. So then we were eating meat and greens. It was just meat and greens. Like apple cider vinegar, everything was organic. I've been asked, like, well, are you sure it wasn't the pesticides? Like we cut out that variable way early on. Like I'm not dumb. We got rid of that. And my symptoms didn't go away after the pregnancy. And I was like, I was doing better than I had been on, when I was doing really badly. I was still unmedicated, but I was depressed. Not horribly depressed, but depressed. Itchy, arthritic with a baby is really not a good time. And so this is December 2017 at this point. It's been 2 years of playing around with diet. And I dropped the greens. I saw Sean Baker on Joe Rogan, and I'd been considering going down to meat, but I was getting a lot of hell for not getting enough nutrients, and especially because I was breastfeeding. People were like, "Well, you need your vitamins. You can't. You're already not getting enough vitamins from this limited diet, probably." So I was scared mostly because of the baby. But then I saw Joe Rogan and was like, "Whatever, I'm just gonna do it." So I went down to just meat, December 2017.
Just meat and water, of course, no even drinks of note, just water.
Yeah, at that point it was just water and chicken and beef. That was what I started on.
Okay, and of course you knew in terms of nutrients, maybe long term without these vegetables, there might be some element of lack of certain nutrients, vitamins, minerals, but I suppose you could always do it for 4 or 8 weeks. You can do anything for 4 or 8 weeks to try it out. So you're kind of just doing that, really.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the plan. So I did that. And pretty quickly, so within the first week, my itching and arthritis went away. And I wasn't itchy like I had been before. Like I was so itchy when I was on a regular diet that I wore fake nails because when I was asleep, I'd scratch my legs till they bled. That's how itchy I was. So I wore fake nails so I wouldn't scratch myself till I bled. So this itch was just an annoying itch. It wasn't like this is ruining my life itch. So that went away within the first week, but my digestion was just a mess. I had bloating when I ate and diarrhea. And I was like, this never happened when I was eating salad. It's not like I have a meat sensitivity. So what's happening? So I thought, well, obviously you need vegetables and this is stupid. So I stopped. And I reintroduced what I was eating before, which was literally like lettuce and apple cider vinegar and olive oil and salt and pepper. And I had a salad. There's some olives in there too, like organic olives with no added ingredients. And I woke up the next day and I was itchy and arthritic again.
So to apparently...
And my digestion was normal.
Right.
Like swapped backwards.
So you've got this impossible trade-off, the razor's edge. You can have your symptoms be at their best with just meat and water, but you've got diarrhea and cramping and bloating alone, kind of singularly.
Yeah.
Then you put back in olives and some lettuce and other bits and pieces, and your digestion gets okay, but some of your more challenging things
serious,
come back.
Yeah.
So now I guess you switch back again to meat and water only.
Yeah. It was frustrating.
Yeah.
It's like, is this something I have to choose between? Like, why is this happening to me?
Just to note there, actually, most people will tend not to believe this because I suppose like your father, we all we all have been brought up to believe in it's genetics, diet can only do a little bit, you must eat this way, it's healthy. Everyone is programmed. I know from birth I was programmed that saturated fat gives you heart disease. I was not programmed that sugar gave you heart disease. So I had reverse programming. We all have. But
Yeah.
anyway,
I know. And honestly, like I've been there. I had people when I was depressed too be like, "Why don't you fix your diet?" Which is a really negative way of trying to get someone to fix their diet because it's like you're doing something wrong and this is your fault. But I was like, "How dare you suggest something this serious could be caused by diet?" Right?
and
So I've been there, and especially if you have a mood disorder and your mental health is affected, like you're sensitive to suggestions that it's something that you could change, especially because you get hopeful occasionally. Like you try a whole bunch of things to get rid of all these problems, and when none of them work, eventually you're like, I'm done. I can't deal with the hope anymore. I get it.
you're dispirited. But the irony is you just need a lot of intellectual horsepower and logic, etc., to negotiate your way through all the things you did to get to the end. And the vast majority of people don't have the wherewithal to do what you did. They would have fallen down with all the kind of counterintuitive responses and ambiguities. They would have just fallen down and ended up on some generic diet. You actually persisted through to the actual very end, which was the true solution. And that's something to be highly commended. That's extremely
Thank you.
rare. I mean,
Thank you.
really rare. I worked in complex engineering problem solving, and even amongst engineers, there's only a small percentage who can deal with the most complex, ambiguous, counterintuitive, twisting ones. It's very rare. So fair play to you.
Oh, thank you. Seriously. I've had my mind blown like multiple times throughout this whole thing with things changing, even just like, overweight, having that have to do with diet. That blew my mind. And then I've been like, walked down the street in 2015, especially, and saw all these people who are like, they're tired or they're falling asleep on the subway and they're overweight. And I'm like, oh my God. So I stopped taking the subway for a while because I was like, all these poor suffering people and they have no idea that the muffin they had as a snack because they were hungry is what's making them miserable. And I was like, yeah, it's been a wild ride.
It's frightening. Yeah, it's frightening. And now the latest figures are around 64% of adult Americans over 45 are now essentially diabetic. And that's CDC figures.
Oh.
If you measure their insulin, it'll be more like 75%. So we live in a world where it's not acknowledged, but...
Because it's normal.
Well,
Almost.
they only measure the glucose, they don't measure the insulin, so they don't really acknowledge it publicly. But 3/4 of your adult population is diabetic. Something's gone wrong, and it's not genetics, and it's not exercise. Everyone didn't get lazy 40, 50 years ago.
That's what you're told. You're like, well, now everyone has an office job and everyone's lazy.
Yeah.
Everybody is lazy. That's the...
America, all during the 60s and 70s, 2 cars, boom, post-war. There were no gyms. You go look at the black and white photos from back then, and you look at Woodstock and all. Everyone is slim, and there's automobiles everywhere, no gyms.
Yeah.
They were not eating the modern toxic food. But anyway, that's an aside. So you've come now to, your 27 has compressed down. You're coming to kind of meat and water and just a few other things at this point in 17.
So that's December 2017. I'm at beef, chicken, and water and salt. I think for the first week I also had pepper, and then I dropped the pepper. I was like, just drop. I like pepper, but I dropped the pepper.
Same here.
Yeah, a lot of pepper. So I dropped the pepper, and then I still have this digestive problem. I'm like, whatever, I'll just deal with it. And then I start getting dizzy after I eat chicken, and I'd been surviving off of like chicken wings for most of my pregnancy, seeming like I wasn't getting this dizzy problem, and I had associated this weird dizzy, drunken feeling with eating sugar, like carbs. Sometimes I'd eat a bunch of carbs. I noticed if I had a whole bunch of sweet potatoes, I'd get kind of like brain fog, dizziness. And then I started getting it with chicken, and I was like, really? This isn't possible. So I tested it out 5 times, and then I cut out chicken. And I was like, okay, I'm just doing beef and salt and water. And my digestive symptoms improved at about 6 weeks. It took 6 weeks. And then that's when my mood also improved, finally. So my itching and arthritis had kind of gone down really quickly in about a week. But then I had this, which I now know are transition symptoms. Even just from dropping the lettuce, But I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, hope this goes away. And my mood stabilized at about 6 weeks. And then at about 5 months, I started getting like the happier, the positive feelings. It took a while to get back though. It wasn't like when I first went low carb, I swear things happened faster. But then after the pregnancy, it took a while to heal from whatever it was. But things have been very, very good. Like this year, 2018, I guess, has been the best year of my life for sure. Then yeah, it's been crazy.
So all of your issues resolved and a much heightened mood over any period in the past. Basically all boxes ticked, as good as it gets nearly after a long period on this diet. But the first 6 weeks though of meat and water
First
only
6 weeks were iffy.
In a digestive sense primarily,
Purely digestive.
Diarrhea,
Yeah,
kind of
I
just
had dizziness after I
oh,
ate
and
too.
dizziness. Also significant transition period.
Significant,
Yeah.
and that was just really dropping salad, like lettuce. It wasn't even like a salad. It was like lettuce and olives.
Right. Well, they could have been interacting with your biome at the time, and a sudden lack of any plant material could precipitate maybe something tricky
I think,
for a period.
I think so. Actually, I'll get into this a little bit later because
Yeah.
it gets more interesting. But one thing I'd like to clarify: my mood actually was more positive when I went low carb than it has been on the carnivore diet. So I've been stable, but stable like a wolf. Like when I first went low carb, I was like thrilled about life and things, and I haven't been able to get to that. But I think I found out why. So I had these really horrible digestive problems, and then they kind of resolved, but it still wasn't great. But it was like, whatever. I'm in a pretty stable place. I'm good. Like I'm happy. I lost like 10 pounds as soon as I went pregnancy weight, as soon as I went on the diet. Like my arthritis is gone. Like I could live like this forever and I'd be okay. Like I'd be good compared to before. Anyway, in September, I did a whole bunch of tests and found out I have C.Difficile, which explains part of the digestive problem. And I think that probably explains the mood not being as good as it should be, because C.Difficile, which is normally saved for immunosuppressed, people in nursing homes or people who've been on antibiotics for a long time, and it's a very serious infection. And I hadn't taken antibiotics. The only thing I did that precipitated these symptoms was switch the diet to the all meat diet. Maybe I had it before then and I didn't have symptoms. I have no idea what happened. But I found out I have had C. diff in September. And then I was like, well, I'm not taking antibiotics to get rid of it. That seems stupid. So I went and did a microbiome transplant. So I went to the Bahamas recently, like a couple weeks ago.
It's all the rage.
God, I was like, is this what I have? Like, there are so many things in life I haven't experienced, but now I've experienced this. It's great. And nothing really changed. And then my symptoms started to go away. And I started to get this happy feeling again. So I'm still only eating meat, which you could say is a problem with the new microbiome. We can deal with that later. But I think the reason my mood didn't get as good as it was because I had this underlying infection for a while. But it's just like one thing. I've just been battling one thing at a time. But the meat diet has, even with C. difficile infection, this has been the best year of my life.
And post the C. difficile, was it somewhat resolved or?
Yeah, it's resolved really recently.
Really recently.
Really
Gotcha.
recently.
So you have to wait a little to see how that pans.
Yeah, I have to wait a little to see how that pans. But as soon as it started resolving, my sleep drastically improved. Like I stopped sleeping after I had my baby, and I thought it was because I was a mom, and moms just don't sleep. So I sleep with white noise because any sound wakes me up. I thought that was just from having a baby, but since the C. difficile's been gone, I can sleep. So I think I've been dealing with not sleeping very well. And the other thing that's happened is I've been getting these like happy feelings that I got when I first went low carb. Like excessively positive feelings. So that's very recent though. So it's hard to say. And I'm pretty careful at not putting too much emphasis on anything until I've like seen it through for a while. So I need like a couple of months. We can rediscuss. But I think the reason I didn't get as good as I was low carb on this meat diet isn't the diet. I think it was the underlying infection.
C.Difficile, yeah. No, methodologically you're very thorough. So yeah, you're every signal you're going to wait and see for sure. These moments of, what did Greenspan say? Irrational exuberance. So these little highs, they're just nice little highs though. They're not like kind of manic.
Oh, manic episodes. No.
Just had to check.
Yeah, no. Fair enough. It's not, no. I know the difference too. I've
Yeah.
had like hypomanic episodes. I know what those are like.
Yeah.
No, this is like positive, just positive feelings.
I think I know exactly what you mean. My mood certainly improved greatly, and I'm in no way comparing to you. I had insulin resistance syndrome problems, but none of what you talk about. But when I switched to low carb, high nutrient dense food, I obviously, the weight fell off me, 30 pounds. All my blood markers got better, extraordinarily better. But my mood and my sleep as well all improved, and significantly. I think I began to have those little moments of just, hey, life is good.
Yeah, right?
You're in the car, maybe the sun comes out from behind
Like
the clouds, and
yeah,
suddenly you
that.
say, hey, life's not bad.
And I'd never experienced that. Like my brother used to walk down, I used to see people walking down the street smiling. And it'd be like, what is wrong with them?
They're on
like,
drugs.
Yeah, they're on drugs, basically. Like if life is good, then you're just at neutral, right? I didn't realize that if life is good, you're actually just happy about being around.
It's a great feeling.
It's
Truly
a great feeling, yeah.
So now you are really cresting into happy life, everything pretty much right, but you may not be getting the nutrients you need. That's something someone could say.
I'm not convinced of that. So I've had vitamin testing. It's too bad. I'm getting one back probably tomorrow. And I'll update my blog. I've been putting all my blood work on my blog. I did vitamin testing. I did it through my doctor, but I did it through a naturopath as well that looked at intracellular levels of vitamins. And my zinc is low and my vitamin D is low. And neither of those should be low on this diet. Everything else is normal. My B vitamins have all recovered. When I was low carb, my B vitamins, except for B12, all the other ones were low. And those are all good now.
Okay, so most of your vitamin status has improved. What remains a bit low is zinc and vitamin D.
But those have been low since I was a kid. And I think that has to do with whatever is making me as sensitive as I am.
Actually, yeah, vitamin D is very interesting because there's so many people now who are inflamed or have autoimmune issues in today's world with our food supply that people are driving down their D status. So the disease state is causing the D to be lowered. So simply throwing D pills in is not going to fix that. You need to fix the root cause, which is what essentially you have now, it appears, largely done. So I'm guessing your D status may gently rise now.
I'm hoping. I mean, I'm going to keep testing. We'll see. I mean, I can't imagine having C.Difficile for who knows how long would help any vitamin level or anything. So I'll just keep testing and waiting.
Right, very good. So another one is vitamin C. There's a lot of controversy around that now, that maybe on a very low carb diet, because vitamin C is needed for glucose metabolism, you may not need as much vitamin C. And I guess you're getting vitamin C through the meat you're eating at least low levels.
Low levels, yeah. That's what I've heard too. And I mean, vitamin C is normal. Like calcium, I've been bothered about calcium. Calcium's normal. Like everything's normal except for zinc and vitamin D, but I don't think that's diet related. I mean, zinc certainly isn't.
Right, and you are, by eliminating, of course, the salicylates and all of the plant things that may cause people issue, well, they're all kind of by definition eliminated now.
Yeah.
So any anti-nutrients or phytates or any of those things, by definition, they're taken off the table in your diet.
Yeah. I've eliminated like everything I could eliminate, basically.
Yeah, and missing fiber then. So fiber has importance. I think it's much more important to have plenty of fiber if you're eating a high glycemic or a high carb diet. It will have mitigating properties against that diet. But if you're eating your diet, how is your digestion generally, bar the C.Difficile?
Well, like since it's gone, it's great. But like I'm a bad example, unfortunately, of that because I've had the C.Difficile problem. So but I mean, you're supposed to be eating fiber, so you're not constipated. That hasn't been an issue. I haven't heard of anyone, especially if they're not including dairy, doing the carnivore diet that has constipation issues. Seems to be veering the other way, if anything. So I mean, so far so good since the C. diff is gone.
Yeah.
Like fantastic. No bloating, like nothing.
Yeah, and dairy, you mentioned dairy. Dairy and the casein in it has come up as problematic for many people. Dairy, even people who don't have issues with other plant foods, dairy comes up quite a lot. And with, say, ApoE4 genotype people who have had heart disease, their inflammatory markers can rise relating to eating cheeses and dairy.
Yep.
So I think dairy has some marks around it, unless you're fully tolerant.
Yeah, I'm pretty skeptical of dairy. Like if you go to my blog and I say, if there are some things you have to eliminate, like, well, get rid of processed foods, get rid of sugar, get rid of soy, the least you can do is get rid of gluten. Grains would be preferable, and get rid of dairy. And so I do lump that in mostly because it was really hard on me. I also think perhaps some of the studies that have been done on animal protein being bad for you, first of all, maybe those studies just aren't done properly in general and should be like booted off to the side, but also lumping dairy in with meat and then seeing ill health effects. Maybe it was the dairy, not the meat. I'm not entirely sure. I just know it was really hard on me. And when I tried to introduce casein-free, lactose-free whey, I still reacted to that terribly. Yeah, I'm skeptical of dairy.
So anyone with significant issues, irritable bowel issues, autoimmune, or anything you really want to get rid of that is very difficult for the medical system to get rid of, or medications, you kind of have to go towards the ultimate elimination diet and really carefully bring things back in. And
really
dairy,
carefully.
I'd agree with you as well, to be honest, Mikhaila, that dairy comes up a lot, and mixing dairy in with meat and fat and protein is a little problematic,
Yeah,
because
it's not the same.
I'd love to see them separated. And I know Dr. Stephen Gundry, interestingly, actually, he has the Plant Paradox book, where he lays out all the challenges for certain people with myriad plant foods. And he also specializes in ApoE4 people who have challenges with fat and protein, animal, dairy, and it can raise their inflammatory markers. But I think he too would acknowledge he mixes dairy in with the animal kind of fat and protein, and it would be good. I must try and get him on the podcast and see, can we tease those apart, if you will.
Yeah, it'd be good to tease those apart.
Yeah,
for sure.
Excellent. So you're feeling great. You're on the top of your game, shall we say, and your father, Jordan, is now even higher in his game than he was. The God knows he was high enough. He's pretty much meat and water too, essentially similar.
He's meat and water, yeah.
And I think
beef. He has chicken occasionally, and he thinks it's okay, but he's mainly beef.
Ah, yeah, very good. Well, I saw him last July. I went with a couple of doctor colleagues in Dublin. He did a big show. I think it was Sam Harris.
Yeah.
And they were on fire, but he's always on fire. So
yeah, he's doing good.
Yeah. So father and daughter both doing fantastic on a very unusual but fascinating diet that seems to have the ability to fix things which are unfixable, really.
Yeah, I know. It's been crazy.
But crazy good in the end.
Crazy good, yeah. No, I'm doing great.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Mikhaila.
Thank you.
Long may it last.
Thank you.